Dhruv Rathee made a bold claim about idol worship in this video. He said it is perfectly fine to worship God through an image or idol as long as you use the idol of God and not of anyone else. Because it is not the idol you are worshipping, but God through an idol. And he quoted Vedas and Bhagavad Gita. To support his argument, he gave an example. Just as people hang a picture of their father to remember him, an idol serves the same purpose, to remember God. Truth is, statements like these cannot be further away from the very teachings of Vedas and Upanishads, and it violates the fundamental of Hinduism according to these sacred scriptures. And in this video, I'm going to prove why. Additionally, I'll take a deeper look into the core teachings of Vedas and Upanishads about how God should be worshipped, as well as the detailed history of Hinduism to find out how idol worship gradually corrupted and evolved over the course of 1,000 of years. So let's get into this. Imagine you are visiting a country with your tour guide and you come across a beautiful lake, so beautiful that you feel an irresistible urge to dive in and swim. But just before jumping in, you noticed a sign that reads, "This lake is highly poisonous. Diving into it may cause severe burns and even sudden death." Additionally, the sign warns that the lake is infested with crocodiles and snakes. But your tour guide is standing next to you, says, "Don't worry, the lake is no longer poisonous and there are no crocodiles or snakes anymore." He even assures you that many people swim in it every year and nothing has happened to them. To support his claim, he even points to another sign that reads, "The water is safe for swimming." Now tell me honestly, very honestly, how many of you would still jump into that lake just to have some fun on your trip? You wouldn't, right? Why? Because the risk is too high and the reward is too small. And even if I increase the reward tenfold, let's say to $10,000, you probably still wouldn't dive in, because nothing compares to the value of life and death. And even if you were 100% sure that your tour guide was trustworthy and had never lied before, the risk would still be too high to rely on his words alone. You would double check before even dipping a single fingertip into the water. So why am I telling you all of this? Because this story is synonymous with everything I'm about to discuss in this video. The lake represents your belief. The tour guide is just another person giving you religious advice. And the signs are the sacred scriptures. And just like with that lake, the risk is too high to believe in false God or to worship him incorrectly. And this isn't just my opinion. These are very words of the Vedas. They are entering darkness, those who worship natural things, and they are entering even more darkness, those who worship created things. So when Dhruv Rathee claims that it is acceptable to worship God through an idol as long as the idol represents God, this directly contradicts the teaching of this verse. But even if, for a moment, I were to agree with his argument that worshipping God's image is fine, but worshipping anything else is not, there are still two major problems with this statement. First, the Vedas and Upanishads explicitly confirm that God has no likeness or visible form. It says in Upanishad chapter 4, "Of him there is no likeness, no image is true to his form is not visible." Further, it says in Yajurveda, "Of him there are no images." This means that if you attempt to make an image or idol of God, it will not be true to his form. Instead, it will be an image or idol of something else or someone else. And thus, you are worshipping something other than God. And by Dhruv Rathee's own reasoning, that would be wrong. Because if you were to remember your late father through an image, but the image you used is this, would that make sense? Your father is not gonna like that, because that is not what he looks like. Second, the Vedas go even further by explicitly emphasizing that God should not be worshipped in the form of an image or idol, as mentioned in earlier verse from Yajurveda. He has no parents, and he is beginningless. They are entering darkness, those who worship natural things, such as sun, moon, trees, fire, etc. And they enter even more darkness, those who worship created things, such as idols, statues, physical representation of deities, etc. So every idol or image worshipped is either a natural object or a man-made creation, which directly contradicts the teaching of Vedas. Brahma Sutra of Hinduism makes it very clear. It says God is not to be worshipped as an image, which is further emphasized in Upanishads. These verses are not taken out of context, and I'll provide references in the description so you can verify them for yourself. That being said, I want to clarify that I respect Dhruv Rathee. He's logical, rational, and often backs his argument with evidence. However, in this case, some of his statements were based on personal opinions or the opinions of Acharya he was interviewing. This brings us to an important point in the discussion, addressing the elephant in the room. If there are both opinions and verses about idol worship, where do these verses come from, and why do the majority of Hindus worship God through an idol? This question could take an entire video to answer, but for now, let's briefly explore its historical roots. Hinduism is one of the world's oldest religions, with a rich history, diverse tradition, and a vast collection of sacred texts. And unlike many other religions, Hinduism does not have a single founder or a central authority, and therefore it has no single point of origin, but has evolved over 1,000 of years. Its roots can be traced back to Indus Valley civilization. During the early Vedic period, the arrival of Indo-Aryans led to the composition of Vedas, the oldest Hindu scriptures. This period was centered around fire sacrifices, or yajna, and worshipping natural forces like Agni, Indra, through hymns and offerings. No temples or idols were used. Worship was symbolic and not directed at physical images. Between 500 BC to 1500 AD, Bhakti movement became prominent, which encouraged a personal connection with God, making devotion more accessible to common people. Since the formless concept of Brahma was difficult to grasp, people visualized God in human-like forms for easier worship. During this period, Krishna, Rama, Vishnu, Shiva, and Durga became the focus of devotion, leading to the construction of temples and idols. During the same time period, influence of epics and Puranas such as Ramayana and Mahabharata depicted deities in human form, making it natural for followers to worship them as physical representation. Purana explicitly promoted idol worship as a means to express devotion. Further, the Gupta Empire between 4th century and 6th century built large temples, promoting idol worship as part of the temple rituals. Over time, idol worship, or also called Murti Puja, became an institutionalized practice in Hinduism. On top of this, there are social and psychological reasons for idol worship in Hinduism. Many found it easier to focus on a physical form rather than an abstract, formless God. This psychological inclination contributed to the widespread practice of idol worship in Hinduism. This is why, even today, majority of Hindus still worship idols and justify idol worship by usually saying something like, idol worship is a means and not the goal. Human minds needs a physical form for devotion. Hinduism teaches different paths to God, and idol worship is one path. Or, idol worship creates a personal connection with God. The justification for idol worship can be plentiful, but it must be supported by sacred scriptures. While there are verses in the Vedas and Upanishads that prohibit idol worship, there are also verses in Puranas that promotes it. So, which takes the precedence? To figure out this, let's understand the sacred scriptures in Hinduism. The entire Hindu scriptures can be divided into two parts, Shruti and Smriti. Shruti, which means heard and is considered as divine origins, consists of Vedas and Upanishads. On the other hand, Smriti, which means memory or remembered, is less sacred and is distinguished from Shruti in terms of its origin. Some of the well-known texts under Smriti are Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and Puranas. Due to their divine origin, importance, and nature, Shruti text, which is Vedas and Upanishads, hold higher authority over any text in Hinduism. This means that if there is a contradiction between Shruti and Smriti, Shruti takes precedence. And if you carefully examine the books under Shruti, there are no verses that explicitly affirm or commands idol worship. Remember, I said explicitly. Instead, the earliest and most authoritative Hindu scripture emphasize worship of the one supreme God in a formless way. On the other hand, in the Smriti books, there are verses that may suggest idol worship. For example, in Vishnu Purana, it says, the Supreme Lord is beyond perception, but he manifests through an image to bless devotee. It also says in Bhagavad Gita, in whatever way people approach me, I reciprocate accordingly. However, these are not explicit approvals within the Vedic text themselves, as these texts are not as authoritative as the Vedas in Hindu theology. This is why groups like Arya Samaj and Brahma Samaj oppose idol worship, advocating for Vedic monotheism. This brings us back to the lake example. Will you trust the sign that says the lake is extremely poisonous or the one that says swimming is safe? In the same way, you would double check before jumping into the lake and verify each claim. Wouldn't you want to reduce your risk and explore the Vedas and Upanishads, the most sacred text in Hinduism, before worshipping God through an idol? I don't want to be another guide on whom you should put your trust. In fact, I'm not asking you to. All I'm asking is to verify each claim before making any decision. And I've already explained the validity of each sign and the sacredness of each book according to Hindu theology. Rest is up to you. Having said that, since Dhruv Rathee tried to justify idol worship from the Quran as well, here is what the Quran actually says about worshipping idol. Just so you can understand how risky the lake is from the perspective of the Quran as well. It says, how can you worship things you carve with your own hand when it is God who has created you and all your handiwork? And then the God says, God forgives not that the partner should be set up with him, but he forgives anything else to whom he pleases. To set up partners with God is to devise a sin most heinous indeed. Both the Quran and the Vedas teach that God is one, even though he has many names. This should not be confused with the idea of many gods. Rather, these are simply attributes of the one true God. If you want to learn more about how other religions promote monotheism and prohibit idol worship, be sure to check out my previous video. See you next time.